Hello and welcome to the Business of Story. I'm your host, Park Howell, and I'm glad you're here. You know, I've been reading studies that show when you use humor in your business stories and presentations that it actually boosts your credibility at work. Some people suggest teams that grin together win together. According to the Harvard Business Review, in one experiment, presenters who used humor were rated as more confident and competent than those who gave joke-free talks, even if they used just one joke, even if it wasn't even a knee slapper. But are you, like many professionals, reluctant to use humor because you fear looking silly or that your joke may not land right, creating another kind of chaos with your people that you're going to have to deal with? Now you can learn how to tickle the funny bone of your audiences as gifted comedian and TV showrunner Marta Ravin joins us to show you 3 ways to find your funny with your business storytelling. I personally like to use jokes, puns, and wordplay when I'm presenting, even if they don't always hit their marks. I feel like it humanizes my message and brings levity and fun to the proceedings. I also rely on borrowed interest to make my business points. For instance, Abbott and Costello's classic Who's on First sketch is a humorous way to illustrate dysfunction in group communication. It's funny and relatable because, well, we've all experienced conversations that have gone sideways, just like this one.
Yes, now, on the St. Louis team, we have who's on first, what's on second, I don't know's on third.
That's what I want to find out. I want you to tell me the names of the fellas on the St. Louis team.
I'm telling you, who's on first, what's on second, I don't know's on third.
Do you know the fellas' names?
Yes.
Well, then who's playing first?
Yes.
I mean the fellow's name on first base.
Who?
I'm asking you who's on first.
That's the man's name.
That's whose name?
Yes.
Well, go ahead and tell me.
Who?
The guy on first.
Who?
The first base.
Who is on first?
Have you got a first baseman on first?
Certainly.
Then who's playing first?
Absolutely.
You know how frustrating it is when your communications do not land right the first time. Now you can be crystal clear with all of your messaging using the and, but, therefore, Agile narrative framework. With the ABT, you cover all 3 bases of powerful storytelling, including agreement, contradiction, and consequence that our primal pattern-seeking, cause and effect, decision-making limbic buying brain adores. So you can avoid the who, what, and I don't know of confusing communications.
Now I throw the ball to first base. Whoever it is drops the ball, so the guy runs to second. Who picks up the ball and throws it to what? What throws it to I don't know. I don't know throws it back to tomorrow. A triple play.
Yeah, it could be.
I don't care.
Oh, that's a shortstop.
Learn how to apply the ABT now with our quick online course called The ABTs of Agile Communications, only found at businessofstory.com/ABT. Your messages will be clearer, more compelling, and safe at home every time. That's businessofstory.com/ABT. You have nothing to lose and everything to gain. After decades of working with celebrity and reality talent, Marta is currently helping individuals find their funny, whether they are prepping for a speech, writing a book, or just want to freshen up their leadership style. Marta can pull out anyone's secret funny sauce and bottle it. And humor is important, especially when you have to warm up an audience or save a presentation that is tanking.
What's hard is when you're booked for an hour. You know, I mean, a comic, it's like your set is going to be 5 minutes, 7 minutes, 10 minutes, 12 minutes. At some point, you know, if you're there to do your 1 hour Netflix special, you're not in front of a room of lawyers. So what your position is very difficult, because if you're having to get through what is 45 minutes of material and they hate you after 3 minutes and you've got to fight your way back, it's rough.
With a career that began as a stand-up comic and on-air host in New York City, Marta has since crafted award-winning compelling narratives for networks like TLC, OWN, Peacock, Nickelodeon, MTV, and Bet, B-E-T. She's the genius behind hits like TLC's Long Island Medium and Universal Kids' Get Out of My Room, still a viral sensation with 285 million views on YouTube and counting. But what truly sets Marta apart is her ability to foster an inspiring workplace culture through her innovative approach to management, steeped in creativity, collaboration, and, you guessed it, humor. So please welcome to the Business of Story, Marta Ravin. Hello, Marta. Welcome to the show.
Thank you, Park. I'm so excited to be here.
Well, the timing was perfect because I was doing some training with Walmart Canada, and I was doing a virtual training. We had a bunch of their leaders in the training, and one of them asked me a question I hadn't heard in a while. It was, Park, when should I not use humor and jokes when I'm communicating out there? And I honestly didn't have a good answer. And then not an hour later, I'm on LinkedIn, and I get introduced to you and your work by a post that you were like, how to find your funny. And I thought, my goodness, the gods, the universe is saying, get Marta on the show. Thank you so much for being here.
Thank you for having me. You're right. The podcast gods, they shine down, and here I am. And I love that question because it does come up a lot, especially in our post-cancel culture, Me Too world. It is much harder to be funny than it used to be. You have to.
Now, wait a minute. Is it a post-cancel culture world, or are they still canceling a bunch of folks out there?
I'm sure you could get canceled. I'm sure I just got canceled for saying it was post. I feel like I
think
did.
You probably did.
Oh my God. Yeah. You're not even going to be able to air this. It's going to ruin your reputation.
That's all right. We're going to roll with it because we're renegades here at the Business of Story. So how did you find your funny growing up? How did you get in the funny business?
Well, growing up, I was definitely the funny person at the dinner table. So in my family, it served me well to always have a little lightness and humor thrown in there. And that was definitely my role growing up. And
why was that? Was it a big family, a strict family? Why did the humor play?
It was a little bit intense. And there were just a lot of things that went on in my house. And it was easier for me to come in with a funny than with anything else, really. So I was always the funny person in the family. I was the class clown in high school, that's in the yearbook. And then when I was in college, and I went to college in Boston, outside of Boston, I just felt like I wanted to try stand-up. And I think I'd never thought of myself as a stand-up comic, but I had seen Ellen DeGeneres perform. So we're talking about now we're in the 90s somewhere. And I watched her and I was like, oh, that's what I do. I tell people funny stories, but I hadn't made the connection that could be stand-up comedy. Mm-hmm. But I realized that's what I'm doing all the time. I'm always coming up with these little funny anecdotes or telling people things. And so I did an open mic night at the Boston Comedy Club, and
how'd that go?
I think probably fine. I had a lot of friends there, so everybody thought I was funny. For many years, and then when I came home to New Jersey, which I grew up right outside of the city, so then I started doing open mics in New York and real shows in New York. And for a while during those first years, you always had to bring people. They were bringer shows. So you are stacking the audience with 15 or 20 of your closest friends and relatives. So it takes a long time for you to realize you're not that funny. It took until I actually got passed at the comic strip, which is, which at the time it still is. It's like a reputable club in New York City. And they put me on like the Saturday night 1:30 in the morning show, very urban, rowdy crowd. And that was the first time I realized, oh, you're not that funny. You know what? Like your stories about your manicurist they're not hitting. No one is, it was.
let us be the judge of that. Share with us one of your funniest bits or jokes or quick little stories. I'm going to put you on the spot here.
That wouldn't get me canceled today.
You can cancel. That's fine.
I did have a joke that, because I was always a big pot smoker, and I felt that, this was during my 20s. So I was always looking for love, smoking a lot of pot, going out a lot. I was kind of just a party girl. And so my joke was waiting for true love is like being high and waiting for the Chinese food delivery guy to come, because you always think you hear them. You're always like, oh, that's him. And then you realize that's not them. And then when they finally come, you're like, oh, that's what it sounds like when they actually come. And you realized how crazy it was that you thought all those other small noises was the Chinese food guy or, true love.
And did you kill with that one? Did people
liked that one. People liked, I talked a lot about because this was at a time where, you had to have a dealer. Like you couldn't just get pot, like I had my drug dealer Angel, who I was like super, super close to. And, I feel like, at some point I realized that like our relationship had kind of gone beyond like just like the dealer, dealee relationship, because I was always like, bye Angel, love you, see you next week. And then, my parents knew Angel, and my mom was like, Angel can come to Passover, but please ask him not to call me his bitch, and so he'd infiltrated our world quite a lot.
And did Angel bring Chinese food with him during Passover for you all?
No, he was great. He brought my mother flowers, and he was perfect.
Yeah. So what'd you do then? You felt like, okay, maybe you got moved up to the major leagues and maybe you didn't have that batting average you were looking for with your jokes. What happened next?
No, what I found was, so during the 90s in comedy in New York, there were two different things going on. There was just your traditional comedy clubs, which were Uptown, which was Stand Up New York and the Comic Strip. And I actually had a show at Catch a Rising Star that was, Catch was still one of like the mainstream clubs, but it was also the birth of alternative comedy. So there were these great places down in the Village one was called Luna Lounge, one was called Surf Reality. And at that time in New York, the Upright Citizens Brigade had just moved from Chicago to New York. So you had this world where Amy Poehler and Janine Garofalo and Mark Maron and Todd Barry and Zach Galifianakis were all on stage at this place called Luna Lounge, and I performed there too. And that was where you could tell stories or do a whole shtick or come on as in a character and just, pretend like, there was a whole other thing going on. People did whatever they wanted. And so that alternative comedy scene was wonderful. And so many great people came out of that. And because there was so much more freedom at that time, because you couldn't, if you were Uptown at the Comic Strip, there was not the patience in the audience to wait for you to like kind of do an entire 2-minute setup to get to some shtick that was like meta, whatever. But it was a great time. So I did that a lot, and I did a special on Comedy Central Premium Blend. That was kind of an accomplishment at that time. Unfortunately, Paramount just wiped out the entire database of all Comedy Central shows.
So you were lost.
South Park's lost. The early Daily shows, all the Daily shows with Jon Stewart are lost. Key and Peele.
Oh man, really? I didn't know that.
Key and Peele is lost. Oh, Google it. Yeah, Comedy Central is like they just deleted the deal that Paramount just made with Skydance is that they're going to. It does not include those archives.
So it wasn't like some stone tech showed up and pushed the wrong button and accidentally deleted these libraries.
No, they exist. I mean, someone's got to have them on a drive or they're somewhere in a database, but they just deleted it. And the people who work on The Daily Show now, some of the writers were tweeting that, a lot of the research they do is, John is going to remember like, oh, remember we did that whole thing back in, 2011,
Yeah.
explaining he had a famous thing where he explained the Israeli-Palestinian conflict with graphics, and it was like kind of a notorious Daily Show moment, and it's gone, so like anything they want to reference, it's gone. So I don't think this is the
Wow.
end of that story. I'm sure someone is
Yeah.
going to come back and save the early Comedy Central work.
Yeah.
I don't think my premium blend episode is anyone's priority right now.
It's gonna do
they're
it.
more worried about South Park.
Then you moved into show running, right?
So
And describe to our listeners, what is a showrunner and what were some of the programs you worked on?
I'd been a stand-up and a writer, and then I was an on-air host for a couple different shows, and it was not a stable way to make a living. It was, as a comic, you had to do the road, and that was just not me. And I had gotten engaged, and I just would be like up on stage and kind of like, what am I doing here? I just like want to be home, like cuddling with my fiance. And I was working at Oxygen at the time, which had just launched as this women's network. So we're in the year like 2000. And I just realized that to be a producer, all you needed to do was speak louder and hold a clipboard. So it's like one day we were just in a meeting and everyone was just having the most ridiculous, annoying conversation about something that could have been fixed so easily. And I just couldn't take it anymore. And I was like, okay, guys, enough. Here's what's going to happen. This is what the show's going to be tomorrow. We're going to open with this. Then we're going to do this. Then we're going to come in with this. Then we're going to show this clip. Then we're going to do this. And then we're going to close with this. And that's what the show's going to be. And my bosses at the time were like, Marta, like, you just produced tomorrow's show. Do you want to be a producer? And I was like, oh yeah, I'll be the producer. Sure. So I realized, that, it was always had been part of me, whatever shows I had put on, that I hosted or put together. I always was putting all the pieces together anyway. That was very natural to me. And that's what a showrunner did. So I really cut my teeth at MTV. I was one of the producers of Total Request Live, which was in the late 90s and 2000s, was a very big show on MTV. It was called TRL. And our first host was Carson Daly. And we would go live every day at 5:00. And kids would line up outside screaming to be brought upstairs to meet Britney or Christina or Justin or Beyonce or whoever the biggest star of the moment was. And it was insane. It was every day. It was like a bomb was going to go off at 5:00 and your job was to not let that bomb go off. Everyone took that show in the building. Everyone took that show very seriously. So for, a show that was just about counting down music videos and having celebrities come on, it was for that network. It was a big deal.
And how long did you run that show?
So I was just, one of the producers on it, and I wasn't in charge until probably like maybe 6 years in, and I did that for a few years, and then we ended. I think it was, when kids stopped, we ended somewhere around 2008. So it was when we realized that kids weren't watching music videos anymore, or the idea of having to, because the way it worked is that kids phoned in to request their music videos. And that just as the internet was exploding, nobody really needed to do that. All the music videos were right there. They're right there on the internet. You could.
You guys got aged
we
out,
got aged out, and we had a really great like last final episode with every person who ever had come on TRL, whoever worked on TRL. I mean, it was definitely a great, it was a good run.
Yeah. So with all of your background in stand-up comedy and show running and so forth, how do you help people find they're funny? And how do you encourage people who maybe don't feel like they're very funny to find it and have some fun with it and actually take the risk and find some courage and go out and share jokes or try to bring a little bit of levity, especially to the B2B corporate world of boring to bored presentations?
Yeah, it's not that hard. It's so because after MTV, I went on to create a couple of reality shows. I did a lot of kids television. So in my career, I have produced so many celebrities, so many reality stars, so many kids, so many regular people. So, and when you're producing them, your job is to make them feel comfortable, to bring out the best in them, to find whatever the anecdote is they're going to tell, to convince them to do a game, to get them comfortable enough to host a show. I often got, I was often have done shows with Green Talent where I was brought in to make sure that we figured out what was unique about this person. And, they had a great audition tape, but they've never been on television before. And how do we make them relatable and funny? So the first thing that I do is I spend time with the person, just without any pressure, just hanging out. You just hanging out and talking and hearing their, stories about, something they would tell their best friend or something that happened with their family, or just watching them interact with people they know really well. So, sometimes it would be with a celebrity, watching them interact with their team, or seeing something. Nowadays, it's very easy, to see what somebody posted on social media. And, if you see that on social media, that there's a little bit of a wink or a nod with what they're posting, they have it in them, or you see what they find is funny. And then it would be, let's say I had a host who was new and green and they're up there and they're, hosting some new show on MTV and they're stiff and they're like, okay, so today on MTV, this is, and then I would say to them, okay, like enough, forget it. Pretend the teleprompter's not there. Let's just talk. Tell me about a funny story that happened with your friends. And they tell me the story. And when I see their face light up and their eyes light up, I'm like, that right there. That's it. Now go to the copy, put on the teleprompter, go. And it's that energy. So when I'm working with people who are trying to deliver a speech, a TEDx, or they're working on a book, it's really getting to know their personalities and to find where they were funny, where I saw them be funny, either with someone, with me, something they wrote, something that they viewed as separate. Like this is, but that's not going to be appropriate here. And helping them feel that you can make it appropriate.
Essentially, you're giving them permission to go and pull up these stories that they feel like, well, that's okay if I'm having a beer with someone and sharing it. I don't know if it's going to go over in a boardroom. And yet it does go over in a boardroom because they're novel and they're surprising as long as they have a point and they're, apropos to what the subject matter is, they're very disarming. And boy, can you win an audience over quickly.
Any of my, favorite bosses that I've had over the years, like including Jon Stewart, including Oprah, including, a lot of big executives, they were funny. Like they were funny. That's, they related to us. They made us all feel part of something bigger than ourselves, and they got to know us and they were funny. So I think, in a meeting, in a boardroom, there are 3 things that I took away from stand-up that I think always apply. So that's going to be reading the room, timing, and crowd work. So, whenever I would be doing a stand-up show, I would always get there a little bit early to see what happened in, on stage and with the crowd before I got there. So I would know what the climate I was walking into and can reference something. And that's what you want to do in a meeting. If it's on Zoom or you're in person in a conference room, if you're, if you feel a vibe, if you can tell that everyone's super hot, or it's 2:00 and everyone needs chocolate, or it's 5:00 and everybody needs beers, do what needs to be done to change that energy and be right there.
So let me take you to a room that I died in. And I don't know how you would possibly have saved it because I tried everything and they were out to get me. And I'm not being paranoid. Here's the thing. Lawyers. I have a real tough time working with attorneys because they already think they know everything, with the exception of one, Doug Passon, who is a brilliant storyteller. But I was hired. It was right after COVID. It was the first time this gigantic law firm got back together with all their people from around the country in Indianapolis. They flew me out for a 1-hour story training. And they had already been together for most of the day. They got in, they had lunch, they had meetings, and I was towards the end leading into happy hour, which I thought that's perfect. In fact, let's have the happy hour while I'm doing the training, you know? And so everyone got their drinks and their food. There was about 40 of them in the room, all dressed like attorneys. And they sat down, and it was the most glum room I have ever worked in. I tried to get them to engage. They refused to engage. I tried to get them to work some exercises. They refused. They kind of half-heartedly participated. I had one young man who I think felt sorry for me, and he started, interacting, and he was having fun, and I was hoping that was going to break the ice. And then Marta, what I learned walking back to my hotel after that with one of the attorneys who was about my age, and he was almost like he put his arm around me, and he was essentially, my colleagues were never going to participate and or help you in that thing. In fact, they believed it was their job to make you feel as bad as you possibly could in your 1-hour training. Isn't that something?
See, that is...
And so I don't know how you would possibly win that room over when I think they, for whatever reason, weren't into it to begin with.
So that's really hard. That's very hard because you had been hired to do a job, and you'd been hired to do a job that you have exercises and you have things that you're going to take them through. As a comic, you could veer off course. So I don't know if this would have, I don't even know how much you could have done this because you had a job to do. Mm-hmm. But, if you're mm-hmm. dying in a room and people, you got to go at them. You know what I mean? So now it's crowd work. That's what crowd work is. It's kind of, what's going on, striped tie? You can't, I see you like the egg rolls. You can't give me something. You can't just, you got to go after them, and you got to get something where you're looking around the room. You know who this guy is. You know who this guy is. Them, and getting, someone to just to break or to give you something back. Or even, what and I'm not saying this would have made a difference because it was a long day. Right. And you were hired to do something very specific and they knew what you did. So if you didn't do that, then you didn't try to do your job. So that's, I think that's a little mm-hmm. hard. But what I always try to do is really do my homework on, I don't know what year this was, but, if there's the website, that you go in there knowing some shtick about some of these people. So if there's, now I think it's different because now websites have everything. They have every single mm-hmm. person in the firm. They have you could look at some newsletter and just kind mm-hmm. of be like, Richie from accounting, I feel like when you were in the newsletter, you had a lot to say. You had a lot to say, Richie. Remember the newsletter about doing your expenses and why that was important? You had a lot to say then. Now Richie doesn't want to talk. So I feel like those type of corporate events, the more you can know about their mission statement, their emails, their culture, the in jokes, any intel you can get before showing up in that room, because then you've got your tools, you've got your, things you can go mm-hmm. to because, you were led to the wolves, so I don't know, if you could have turned it around.
Well, you reminded me of something. Another time I was down in Fort Lauderdale. I was working with a healthcare company called Medela, and they were very receptive. It was a big crowd. They had about 60 of their sales team in there, and it was a fun event. One guy was sitting there, big dude, loud dude, and he was kind of, throwing the tomatoes at me and having fun kind of at my expense and whatever. And I was okay with that because everyone was kind of getting into it, but I also felt like I had to disarm him a little bit. So we went into our first activity and they were doing their little stories. And I went over to him precisely because he was, coming at me. And he had the loudest sport coat on in the room. In fact, I don't even know if anyone else had a sport coat on, and this thing was loud. It was neon loud. And I came up to him. I said, "Hey, what's your name?" I was Jim. I said, "Nice coat, Jim." And the whole place just died laughing because they were thinking the same thing I was thinking. And he loved it. He loved the attention. He didn't take offense to it. And then I won him over immediately. He was like ready to participate and have fun. And I never thought, it just came to me naturally, but it's what you were talking about right there, is you got to sometimes disarm
what's
them.
in the room. You know, I say that I had a friend who I was working with. She was doing a big keynote in, I feel like in Panama, or it wasn't in the country. And it was, everybody was coming into this hotel, and you know, so it wasn't people she knew, it was people from, you know, all over the world. And not everybody, you know, English was not everyone's first language, but everyone spoke English very well. But I said, okay, you are in the same mindset they are in. So it's 9 a.m. It's the first meeting of the morning. What happened when you got to the airport? What was customs like? What is the hotel been like? What was breakfast like? What are the rooms like? What is that common denominator that everyone has experienced that you can start with? You know, like, were you at breakfast? That omelet station, that was pretty nice, you know, or whatever it is. Like, did any of you guys have Louis at customs? Because he was fantastic. He was welcoming. He was, you know, like, anything that says I'm in this with you. I am on the same level as you. I'm experiencing everything you're experiencing. This hotel sucks. The elevators are slow. There's nothing in the gift shop. They're like, whatever, you know, like, so just being in the moment with people and acknowledging it, I feel like that, you know, just makes everyone feel equal.
Let's go back to that question that Walmart Canada leader asked me, you know, and he sort of, it was coy or shy. He was shy in asking it. Like, he wanted to do it, but he wasn't sure if he should use humor, jokes, or how to do it. So say you're by yourself and you're that gentleman, and he doesn't have you to help coax him through it at the moment. And he's sitting there and he's got a big 20-minute presentation to his boss and a few others the next day in the conference room, and he wants to bring some levity to it. What should people think about? Where do they find maybe a little joke or something that actually is going to land versus blow up on them?
It's really, you really have to listen to your instincts. I feel like from what you've told me and what I know of Canadians, no, I'm just kidding. I don't know anything about Canadians, but
they're the nicest people in the world. No, so sorry. Sorry.
Right. So this guy, he had something he wanted to say. He's not asking that question if he didn't have something. He had something inside he wanted to say. His instincts were telling him to say something. He had jokes. He had this thing, but he was holding himself back. So what I say is listen to that inner voice and let it out. Like, say the thing, because if you're thinking it, someone else is thinking it. And obviously not if it's racist or homophobic or, you know, like,
you don't want to be canceled.
Not if it's something very offensive, but I think there's always room for levity. People always appreciate it. And, you know, if you are worried about it, you run it by someone. You know, I had a friend who was gearing up for a really big interview, and she was doing it on Zoom, and she had a Zoom she was interviewing for 4 different people. And, you know, so she was going to be by herself, and all these people know each other. And so we're going over it. And this is one of my like best friends who I know is so funny. And she was so stiff. And I just kept saying to her, like, come on, that's not who you are. Like, don't, you know, these are real people. Your interview is at 4:00. That means they've had to go through a whole day of interviewing people. Acknowledge that. Acknowledge what the time and space is. Acknowledge like where you're all at, and try to, you know, make it as painless as possible. And when you're losing them, when you know you're losing them, you know, which is the worst feeling, but you know it's happening, you gotta pivot. You gotta address it and pivot. You gotta just say, I feel like I'm losing you people. What's happening? Is it, I'm just boring? Are you tired? Like, just address it head on. And, it's easier said than done, but it's always the thing. It's the thing inside that you're thinking that everyone else is thinking. You got to just say it.
It's the elephant in the room,
yeah.
right? And so maybe you're giving a presentation and you've been lucky enough to get that 1:30 p.m. slot after everyone has sat through a day and a half of meetings, a big lunch, and now they're like, oh God, not another person. And you have a hard time warming up that room. We've all been there. And so it's really about calling out what's already on everybody's mind. I get it. You'd rather be by the pool than listening to me right now.
Or say, or say, you know what, guys, this was supposed to be an hour. What do we say about, I'm going to go real quick. What about we do it in 45 minutes? Is everyone down for a 45 minute? And obviously make sure the people who hired you are okay with that. But kind of just saying like, I'm on your side here, and then bring out the candy, that 1:30 spot, whether it's like Hershey's miniatures, like Kit Kats, Hershey's Kisses, like Mike and Ike's, like people want candy. People want candy. People also, I think people like an agenda, you might have a PowerPoint or you might have whatever, but really saying to them, here's how this is going to go. Because when you're sitting in something that seems like never ending and you don't even know, like, is this person, do they have 20 more slides or do they have like 3 more slides, but letting them know, like, kind of what is this going to entail, and and making sure that everyone's on board with that. You understand the position that they are in, and your job is to make them, do whatever you're supposed to do, but you also want them to enjoy it.
Yeah. Does this fall under that thing about timing? We're really talking about 3 things: reading the room, the crowd work when you have to go out and actually, go hand-to-hand combat with some people sometimes in a fun way. And then this idea of timing, or in your mind, is timing about how well you time a joke and pause.
For me, timing is about when is the right time to ask a question, contribute to the conversation, or not. I think there is a lot of pressure, especially, it depends what the culture is. But if we're just talking about not where you're going to give a presentation, but just an internal meeting, that's just, everyone has them all day long. And there's that pressure where you, especially for a younger person, you want to show that you're smart, you want to show that you're listening and that you've got good ideas, but that there's like a time and place for that. So if the time and place is not like 5 minutes before the meeting ends, if you, go in there prepared, if you know what this meeting is about and there's something you want to contribute, know exactly what it is that you want to say, and then wait for your opening. And, obviously if the person has said, well, do all questions at the end, or like that there's something, there's some sort of order to it that you don't want to disrupt, but make sure that, you pick your moment, and that's your moment, so like pick it well, like, and go in and have a well thought out question or idea, but also make sure that you're not so caught up with your brilliant idea that you haven't been listening to the room and listening to the conversation. So you're just thinking, I want to say my thing, I want to say my thing, I want to say my thing, but that you're not listening to what has been said to know that, like, oh, they covered that, or, oh, we already decided that was a really bad idea. So to really time it.
So it feels like it, in that order then, it's kind of like read the room first. So you get a sense, are these a bunch of, mean attorneys that are going to run you through the ringer, or are they a vivacious group of salespeople with one real crazy dude in the middle of it that you can actually have fun with? Read the room. And then the timing. Well, I want to make sure that my points are landing at the right time while I'm reading the room. And in the reading of that room, crowd work may or may not come in, right? You already probably have crowd work designed into it. I'm a huge believer that the work we do in training and sales training and so forth with storytelling, it's performance art, first and foremost. I've got to get up there and entertain them if I'm going to educate them. Because if I'm not entertaining, then they are going to disconnect. Unlike those attorneys that never connected to begin with. And believe me, Marta, I was so entertaining.
I bet you were.
So
I feel like
charming.
And that's the thing, Park. There's times where you're never going to get them back. Like there's just,
it ain't going to work.
And it's what's hard is when you're booked for an hour. A comic, it's like your set is going to be,
God.
5 minutes, 7 minutes, 10 minutes, 12 minutes. At some point, if you're there to do your 1 hour Netflix special, you're not in front of a room of lawyers. So what your position is very difficult, because if you're having to get through what is 45 minutes of material and they hate you after 3 minutes and you've got to fight your way back, it's rough.
They never liked me when they walked into the room. Can I tell you? So this idea around timing too and working the room, does that come from your experience in the show running, producing days? I mean, when you were thinking about you producing the big live MTV show, that you had to have a sense of pacing and timing and when things were going to land at what time, while you're also being prepared for what you have no ideas coming your way.
Yeah, live television is, there's just nothing like it to really train your muscles and your mind in that way, because you're watching as the producer in the control room. So I'm in what they call the hot seat. So I've got a headset on, there's screens in front of me, I'm hearing my host, I'm hearing the talent, I'm watching them, I'm watching this, I'm talking, I have a panel in front of me. So one button is to talk to my host, one is to talk to the director or everybody. And then I've got executives behind me or in my ear. And it's a very, I love it. It's something I like, that sort of environment is I love controlled chaos. So I thrive in that environment. But it took a long time to get good at that. It's not something you just naturally jump into. It's a lot of moving parts. So, especially, the biggest job you have is your host. Your host needs to feel like you are there with them. And it's, you're hearing the talent say something, you're remembering a quote they said or a story they did that you guys are, had planned to talk about in the next segment. But the talent they just queued it up. They just did it. So you have to say to your host, now, talk about the story. Ask him again about the story. He just brought it up. Ask about the story. So it's, or it's saying to the director, they just run the B-roll, run the B-roll, run the B-roll, run the B-roll, because if, and then I've got 7 people behind me being like, run the B-roll, so yeah, right. You have to, but it's about, you have all the tools in your toolbox, there's, 5 stories that they could talk about. There's, you've got 3 clips ready. You've got, 5 different B-rolls ready. So it's not like, there is to some extent a contained amount of elements you would show at any or go to or tricks to use at any different time. And it's just a matter of, making sure everybody goes to the right one at the right time.
Well, and it's true when you are making a big business presentation. It could be sales, marketing. It could be in front of a large gathering, It's like have that planned out, but know it's going to be some controlled chaos. You don't know if that PowerPoint projector is going to go down the big screen, you're going to lose your mic, or you're going to have a dead crowd out there that just isn't responding. What do you do, Marta, if you tell a joke that always kills in one environment, you roll it out in this one, and it falls flat, and or you find maybe you're reading the room and they're a little bit taken aback by it? Is there any recovery from a bomb like that?
You say wow, okay, just so you guys know, that's my go-to that everybody loves. So now I'm that was, I don't know what we're going to do now. I mean, or you just, and then it's wait, did I offend? Wait, was that offensive? I was just offensive. This was horrible. This is, I feel whatever, that not this is a Me Too cancel thing, but I mean, it kind of was. I was doing stand up. I hadn't done stand-up in forever. And then this was probably like 5 years ago. And somebody asked me to do a show, and I'm like making my return to the stage, and it was a great crowd, and there were a ton of people there. And there was this really young kid who was the waiter, kind of, and he was adorable. And he was like just this like adorable, like 20-year-old kid who was like, kind of part of the night. And I just kept, talking to him and just talking about how adorable he was, just like give it up for like, so, and I'm not thinking twice about this. Like I just, had like pulled him into I kind of pulled him into the act and, and I can't remember his name right now. Afterwards, the manager of the club came up to me and she said, just so you know, you made da-da-da feel really uncomfortable. And if you were a male comic and that was a female waitress, do you think it would have been appropriate what you said tonight? And I was like, because she was right. I kept saying, look how adorable he is. He's like 20. Everybody give it it was, once I looked at it through that point of view, I was mortified. I was like, it had never occurred to me that's what I was doing. That if I was a, 40-something male comic, and talking about a young woman about how adorable she is and let's give her a round and look at how cute she is, look when she does the drinks, whatever I was saying, it would have been inappropriate. And it, especially in the culture we were in at the time. And I was, I was literally mortified. And I went up to the kid and I said, I am so, I was just, I didn't even know what to say. I was just, I had never thought of it that way. I'd never thought me just being me like that would make someone uncomfortable. And then he's like, I wasn't really uncomfortable. He was like, it was fine. And then he asked me for my number and I was like, oh, okay. I thought we had something, but whatever. It was inappropriate.
We were connecting. Yeah. I had a 60-second radio or TV commercial for Audi that was produced by Venables Bell's partners up in San Francisco. That was just absolutely brilliant storytelling. It came out roughly about 2013, maybe, as their Super Bowl spot. And I loved it because it was a great example of demonstrating the hero's journey in 60 seconds. And I dissect the story, and what it's about is called the prom spot for Audi. You look it up.
I kind of remember that.
Marvelously
I almost
done.
feel like I remember that.
It's
the 2013 Super Bowl.
The young man's
performed.
He's going to his prom by himself. And his mother starts the whole thing out by saying, it's okay, honey. A lot of kids go to the prom by themselves. Yeah, sure. And then his dad throws in the keys to the new Audi. So it's kind of this rite of passage. He drives there, and as he's making his way to the prom, you can see he's getting more confidence, more courage. He walks down the hallway of the high school. You can hear the music thumping in the background. He walks in, and in the middle of the big dance, he plants a kiss right on this beautiful blonde prom queen. Of course, the prom king is like the quarterback of the school. He sees this. He goes over, cut to the boy driving home, and he's got a black eye and a big grin on his face. And it's an adorable kid spot. And I used it for many, many trainings over a course of many years. And then the Me Too movement hit, and I did not anticipate it, Marta, at all. I showed it one time, and I had 3 women from the crowd come up afterwards. How dare you show that commercial? And I go, why? Because he went up and he just kissed that girl without asking. And I'm like, really? Oh, wow. And so I had to pull it out of my repertoire. And still, it's innocent.
Totally.
It's high school innocence. And to this day, it's beautiful storytelling.
No, I totally get it. I knew where you were going because you can't do that anymore. I have a 17-year-old son, and I am like, I will drill into him, just like, don't kiss them unless you have to make sure they're okay with you kissing them. You can't do anything unless. He's like, Mom, they're okay with it. I'm like, no, you have to get a verbal confirmation, and and he's looking at me like I'm insane. But it's especially, when you have boys, they're idiots.
Mm-hmm.
You kind of
inadvertently get themselves in a lot of trouble.
Totally.
Yeah. Well, Marta, this has been absolutely exceptional. I've had so much fun with you. Where can people learn more about you and what you do and the trainings that you provide to help people find their funny?
They can go to my website, martaravin.com, and they can look there. And I have a lot of stuff on there about finding your funny. And this was so much fun, Park. I loved it. And we got my mic to work. I think By the way, your listeners, Park is also does a lot with IT. He came in, and I couldn't get the mic to work.
We did a long distance mic check. Yep. We got it fixed. Marta was kind enough to run down the road. Where did you get the adapter?
Center.
Did you have to go to like a Best Buy?
Which is like the Best Buy of Queens. And I got a dongle, and guys, it's not all magic. It doesn't all come off so smoothly. There was a rehearsal. We had a rehearsal. Yeah, but I appreciate you getting back on. And I think you have a special offer for our listeners, a one-on-one consult with you for free that they can contact you. If you go on my website, or you'll see it on my LinkedIn, there's always a, contact me type of a button. And yes, for a complimentary consultation one-on-one. So I would love to do that.
That's so cool. I appreciate that. And throw, one of your jokes on them. I hope you do from your stand-up days to keep that stuff fresh and circulating out there.
Yes, we laugh the whole time. My consultations are very fun. And unfortunately, they are on Zoom, so I don't get you liquored up beforehand. But, we make do. We make do.
Very good. Well, Marta, thank you so much. And have a fantastic rest of your week.
Thank you, Park.
To close our show today, I would like to give a shout out to one of my all-time favorite comedians who recently passed away, Bob Newhart. One of my favorite jokes of his is when he said, "I don't like country music, but I don't mean to denigrate those who do. And for the people who like country music, denigrate means put down." For an accountant turned comedian, he was the best, talking about turning data into drama. Thanks for listening to and sharing this edition of The Business of Story to help you find your funny. Thanks, Caden Howell, for editing our show, Marissa Hill for marketing, and Darius Holbert for our theme music. I hope you'll join us next Monday when entrepreneurial phenom Jenny Poon, founder of Hub, a tech company revolutionizing small business support, and Cahoots, Arizona's leading co-working space, shows you how to persevere in all of your endeavors, no matter what troubles the universe throws your way. Until then, remember that the most potent story you will ever tell is the story you tell yourself. So make that a great one. Thanks so much for listening.